Hello and welcome to WashingtonExec's video series. I'm senior reporter Rachel Kirkland, and I am joined by Maliek Ferebee, who is the Chief Human Resources Officer at DLH Corporation and a leader in the company's efforts around diversity, equity, and inclusion. Maliek is a board member of the Association for Corporate Growth, a member of WashingtonExec's Human Resources Council, and in his free time, he serves as a mentor with Big Brothers Big Sisters and as a mediator at the Conflict Resolution Center of Montgomery County, Maryland. So welcome, Maliek. Glad to have you here.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
So to get started, tell me a little bit about your background.
Yeah, the background, I think, is one that is as diverse as you can get for a human capital professional, in the sense that I've come through the organization and from my development in human capital, from being at the associate level and work my way through to the level I'm at now. And that has given me great perspective, especially when it comes to DE&I, to see the fortunate level that myself and any other human capital member has had, because we've had to deal with DE&I from the inception of our careers. It's just part of being in human resources that you're addressing a lot of DE&I concerns. And I think that's reflective in what you had to say about my background. I've been involved with the Big Brothers Big Sisters organization for many years, maybe 2 decades now. And that has tendencies specifically related to DE&I, because you're mentoring, facilitating, and coaching individuals, specifically for Big Brothers Big Sisters, individuals who are in socioeconomic disadvantaged areas, but also many children, young people who are in different ethnicities. And that's a constant impact of what the impact of not only the environment, but the ethnicities and the opportunities those individuals have. How does that impact them, and how you can make a difference to it? Same thing to be said about mediation, and the mediation that I've done in a volunteer level with the acronym is CRICMIC, but with the Conflict Resolution Center in Montgomery County, is addressing a lot of concerns in the community, and it impacts DE&I heavily. How do you leverage equity when 2 individuals, neighbors, may be at an impasse? Sometimes it's culturally based, where someone doesn't understand the thought process of someone else just because of their cultural heritage and how those cultural heritage decisions impact the community.
Can you elaborate on why this work is so important to you personally?
I think it's important to me, but more so important to society as a whole. How I look at myself and how I try to leave a mark on what I do is primarily based on one factor. How do I want to impact society as an upstanding member of society? One thing that I've done myself and a few of my friends, we like to talk and pontificate. And back in 2008, we found that a lot of the talking and pontificating about ideas and things that are impacting our communities, we could actually put that to good use. And we formulated a group called the Blue Hippo Men's Forum. And that Blue Hippo Men's Forum tackles issues that impact our community and us as individuals. Now, it so happens that everybody in the group is from the Caribbean, because my heritage is Jamaican. And we look at things through that lens. What are things that are impacting our community, how we see them, and what can we do about it? And we've identified, and this group has been going on from 2008 to now. And we used to meet once a month. Now we do it every quarter, because lives and things get in the way. Yet it's an important part of our makeup, my makeup, with the same genesis and principles I indicated earlier. How do you become a contributing member to society? And that entire group or forum that we focused is DE&I bent, DE&I community service bent. And sometimes we just talk about issues that impact us from a DE&I perspective, whether it's the diversity piece, the equity piece, or the inclusion piece. And there's probably more areas to DE&I that we all understand. But when we use the term DE&I, that's the global term to cover a lot of different issues.
Now, you came to DLH in the fall of last year. Um, New D&I leader at your company. You're in a unique position to help kind of set the tone for the company moving forward. You mentioned one value as far as active listening. What else is especially important to you right now, or what else are you really focusing on in your role?
For DE&I as it pertains to DLH, I think our focus is to broaden the scope of what DE&I means to the organization and any stakeholder that is involved with our organization. Typically, when we think of DE&I, we think of it through the lens of what can we do for our employees and how can we impact the DE&I perspective to our employees, meaning through employee resource groups, getting people to talk about how DE&I impacts them, how the organization's decisions are impacting them through a DE&I lens. For DLH, what we're starting to do is look at how do we impact DE&I in all our relationships? How do you look at DE&I with the relationship with your customer? How do you make decisions that are inclusive to diversity, equity, inclusions in terms of partnerships, teaming, the type of contracts you go after, or the proposals that you create? How do you look at DE&I with vendor relationships? Do you hold your vendors accountable to certain DE&I initiatives? And how do you make that and communicate that to all of those stakeholders so they understand we as a company, DLH, set a certain bar for DE&I, and we want our partners to set the same bar and meet us at that bar. That's where we're taking it to that next level. I'm not sure many companies are doing that. I'm sure their companies are doing it. We want to make sure in our industry, we become the leaders of looking at DE&I from that broader perspective, just outside of the lens of employee to employer or outside the lens of human capital, and make it much broader.
Absolutely. Can you tell me about a time that you've worked through something especially challenging around DE&I, whether at this company or another one?
I can. As I tell employees many times, for us to be good or great at anything, you're going to have to fail forward. And DE&I is no exception. If you want to push the envelope and ensure that you're doing the best you can at being a true DE&I professional, or you want to ensure that your organization is leaning forward on DE&I, you're going to encounter some missteps. And one so misstep occurred with me. And I'll give you the story behind this example, and then I'll give you the takeaway. When I first came to DLH, I was visiting some of our sites. And in doing so, I met upon an employee at one of the sites, had a great conversation with this particular employee, came back to do some follow-up meetings. And in the follow-up meetings, I was using certain pronouns to identify that employee who was also on these follow-up calls. Shortly thereafter, I got an email from one of my employees indicating to me, Maliek, you may have made some incorrect pronouns with this particular person. Even though unconscious and there was no malintent, it was still incorrect. I quickly reached out to that employee and apologized, and also indicated to that person, I will use this as a learning moment for me, but also a teaching moment for others, that we need to be more conscientious as a society. And again, I'm the chief human resources officer and still have blind spots when it comes to DE&I. So that to me was a very teachable moment.
Now, you and I had a conversation earlier about the process of education, and we talked about recommended reading for leaders who are wanting to take the next step. Can you elaborate on what your advice is on recommended reading?
Find out where you are in your DE&I journey and peg yourself there. And it's not a negative to be pegged at the bottom of the rung. It's best to know where you are. And then based on where you are, you can ask for recommended reading to say, I'm at the beginning stages of understanding what DE&I means. Does anybody have any recommended reading for me if I'm at the beginning stages? Then you can get the type of recommended reading that align with where you are. And if it's for the company, you frame it very similarly. The organization is at a very mature level. We don't have documentation to support that, but the organization itself is very mature. What type of recommended reading do I need to document that type of maturity? A structure, a process, a procedure, and then you get recommended reading that associated with that. So I'd first recommend that find out where you are, find out where the organization is, and then determine that the recommended reading that you receive matches where you need to be or where you would like to be.
Makes a lot of sense. So, my final question for you, can you talk about how companies can ensure that DE&I isn't just a buzzword or something you say, but it's something that has a real impact?
That is the question of the day, because of where we are now with DE&I. DE&I has become a buzzword over the last 2 to 3 years. The importance of it is increasing to businesses, and many times it's translating itself into profit because investors are making decisions based on how involved companies are with their either environment, their sustainability, or their governance around DE&I. Therefore, the buzz of it is becoming more prominent. How do you mitigate that? Is to get involved. Awareness is the first stage. You have to determine what your awareness is, what the company's awareness is, what does DE&I mean to your organization. And to lift it from paper to reality is the culture of the organization. What culture can you set in the organization to do that? You can't just say, we want DE&I, let's do some ERGs, employee resource groups, and start it up. Well, if your organization is not ready for that, it's going to fail before you even start. You have to find out the awareness of what DE&I means to the organization. And based on that awareness, do we start with education? Do we start with formalizing process? Do we start with garnering what is happening in DE&I and formalize it to communicate it to the broader masses? Do we need to refresh? Because if you've been doing it for years and it's gotten stale, how do we refresh it? Do we need a dedicated resource? Do we need a committee? All those questions start to come to the forefront after awareness. You got to stick the peg in awareness first, and then that will help you move the needle on culture.